So like this same client, she asked me, she's like, how do you stay motivated? And really it, kind of struck me. I was like, I don't know how to answer that because really the term motivation kind of escapes me sometimes. And this sent me down like a path of like, what does motivation actually mean to me? And the definition, or at least like the feeling that I came up with was like, okay, when I feel motivated, it's very easy for me to act. Like I don't have a lot of pause, or I don't have any reservations before I do something. Like I'm just very quick, like, yes, I'm going to do it regardless. I'm not going to make this a conditional behavior. And I kind of associate it with the feeling of like second guessing, like, should I do this? Like, is this worth doing it? Like, I don't really overthink when I'm motivated. And like in this context, she was asking me like relative to like her own motivation, because she's like, I'm really struggling like with food behaviors around food, and I'm in a contest prep, and I just want to know like what keeps you on track, what allows you to be in that state. So I kind of gave her my definition. I was like, well, I feel like the ease in which I can take action is a very good litmus for me to know whether or not I'm motivated. And that for me ties directly into my why, because if I'm very confident in my why, if I know exactly why I'm doing something and I feel like it is the correct direction to move forward, then there's not a lot of pause. There's not a lot of reservation with acting. And I think like another interesting way to look at this is like, you are typically the most motivated. You typically have the least hesitation to act when you believe in what you're doing, when you feel convicted in the path that you're on. And I think even more so like the feeling of, feeling enlightened or feeling like encouraged to move forward. I mean, I think that really manifests when you are in a state that is the opposite of deprivation. And I think oftentimes people will feel really motivated when you've been deprived of whatever it is that you're chasing. So like a very obvious example for me right now is like, hey, I could diet. I could diet right now. Like I could start dieting tomorrow and put myself in a really big deficit because it's been months since I've had to be restrictive. I could get on the treadmill, and the first time I do cardio, I could go in and not think twice about it, because it's like, hey, I feel that motivation in order to do something that I haven't really had to exercise a lot of willpower recently on. Now, I talk about this in respect to dietary fatigue because I think a lot of people, they, get down into the weeds of like perma dieting, and they forget that like there is dietary fatigue accumulating in the background. And no matter how long you've been on a diet, that duration is going to cause some kind of movement of the needle of dietary fatigue. And really, like, the thing that irks me is that no matter how much weight you've lost, the amount of time that you perceive that you've been dieting, whether you've actually lost weight or not, that is going to accumulate in the background. And it's not something you can just ignore. You think about it like, when is the time that you are motivated to sleep, like the most motivated to sleep? It's probably when you're sleep deprived. When are you motivated to eat? It's probably when you have felt starved. And if we're talking about like chronic periods of feeling underfed, under-recovered, these things might be persistent to a point where they never go away. And really, like, when I start to peel back the layers of like, for me, what allows me to reignite motivation, it comes down to my perception of how much effort something is going to take and how hard it is to maintain. So like I take the term runway and I frame it almost like, okay, what is the max amount of time, or the predicted amount of time that I can continue to do the behavior, do the action that I'm currently doing without any kind of interference or resistance. And I think really like your perception of how hard something is plays a major role in your runway as well as your motivation. For instance, like someone who's been shredded, who's been at like 12, 15%, if they get up to like 25 body fat percentage, and of course I'm talking about women, this might feel very excessive. Whereas like, in the other hand, someone who's reached just 25% coming down, I mean, like 25%, every percentage down might feel like a huge monumental like milestone. And for them, like that is a major accomplishment. They absolutely should be proud of that. But it's these reference points that ultimately shape us and put us in positions as to whether or not we have the capability, we have the skill set to continue moving forward. And this is like a really tricky way that I like to kind of use it on myself, like reverse psychology. I try to think like, okay, what is the thing that I'm not getting right now that I want? okay, if we can operationalize this, that thing, whatever it is, let's map out like what are the exact actions that need to happen that if I do them for long enough and I do them well, will almost guarantee that I achieve whatever it is that I'm after. And I think one of the biggest limiting factors is being honest with yourself. Because that does take just a high degree of vulnerability to address like what are the things that are preventing me from getting where I'm trying to go. And I think this is really your starting point. If you don't have a clear idea of where you're trying to go, identify that. Once you have that down, once it's a very clear idea, once you know, okay, this is said destination, it's input into maps, now you have to think about, okay, what is the most effective way to get there? That isn't typically going to be just doing a show, getting on a platform, entering a race, doing a fat loss challenge. It's usually going to start with identifying what are the skills that I do not have or I currently have that need addressed and honestly need fostered.